Okay, we are live, Senate Education Committee, Wednesday, May 21st, a little bit after 2 o'clock. We are listening to presentation about amendment from Superior Party and others. Today's is on requirements for related to the appointment of Secretary of Education. So
great. Well, thank you for having me. For the record, Senator Ruth Hardy from the Addison District. This is an amendment related to the appointment process for the Secretary of Education. And I sort of put this together with my former chair of government operations hat on, because those of you who were here last year remember that the Secretary of Education appointment process was a little, regardless of the outcome of the vote and all that, the process itself was a little vague in statute. And so it led to, it got dragged out. So we had a year without a Secretary of Education. So I know that in H480, as you all have worked on it, it does have some language related to this, because I think we all kind of acknowledged that it was important to have it more fleshed out in statute, so we didn't have any. So my language builds on some of the language that you all have in your amendment, but adds a few more steps. So that within 30 days, and I believe that's similar to yours, they would have to start the process, and that the state board would not initiate it. And the governor, mine is different in that the governor may issue a letter. I think there was a shall in yours, that the governor shall say, let's initiate a search. This would say the state board would start the search, and the governor may issue a letter saying, this is the kind of secretary I want. Presumably every governor would do that, but it wouldn't hinge the state board starting the search on waiting for the governor, which I think is what happened last time, is the state board didn't do anything because they were waiting for a letter from the governor. So this would clarify that, and then create that the state board would not send any fewer than 3 candidates to the governor within 90 days, and that the governor would have to appoint somebody within 30 days. And that just sort of keeps it moving along, so that there are deadlines for the entire process. So we don't get into the position again of not having a secretary that, the secretary would be a cabinet member, of course, and then it serves at the pleasure of the governor. And then there was also some conversation about the sort of what kind of experience and expertise were necessary for a Secretary of Education. And so this version, my amendment, would flesh this out a little bit more. So experience and expertise in public education management policy, curriculum development and classroom instruction, and educational leadership. The current is just demonstrated leadership and management abilities. I think obviously we want a Secretary of Education who has experience in education and curriculum development and classroom instruction, meaning that they've actually been in the classroom, they've developed curriculum, so this is just providing a little bit more meat on those bones. So that is the amendment.
Okay. Questions? Ready?
Why just in public education now? Is that going to exclude somebody that worked years in the private sector in education that did the same thing, did curriculum development, classroom instruction, but only did it in the private?
Well, I think that the reason that there's the focus on public education is something like 95% or more of our students go to public schools in Vermont. And so having a Secretary of Education that has no experience in public education is really problematic, because that means they don't really understand the public school system. And so making sure that they have education experience that's related to public schools because that's what our system is, mostly public schools. It doesn't mean they couldn't have experience in private schools if they've done both public and private. That's great. But they can't, having no experience in public education, I think is problematic, given that they would be the leader of a public school system.
Yes.
So would that have precluded Secretary Saunders from responding?
I think that she would not have had this kind of experience. She didn't have the public education management and policy experience. She might have been able to make that argument, but I think that this is, wanting to make sure that we have a Secretary of Education that really has the experience necessary to lead the system that we have of public schools and have, the experience necessary to be a leader of our public school system in Vermont.
So curriculum, having developed curriculum, that's a specialty. Is there, if you've never done it, but you've had, done over people that have, isn't that a special requirement?
Well, anybody who's been a teacher has developed curriculum. So, having experience and expertise in curriculum development and instruction just means that you've been a teacher, because teachers have, and principals, also school leaders, anybody who has experience at actually doing the work of educating somebody has developed curriculum.
So again, back to the public, what kind of gets me there, if we hire somebody from California, Florida, Kansas, they're in the public system, but their public education system may be vastly different from ours. So you're just saying that they'd have the know for all because they're in the public eye over somebody that's from a private sector.
Well, public school systems in California or Florida or Kansas are still public school systems. And so, they would understand how a public education system works and what goes along with that, and be able to translate it into our Vermont public education system much better. There are similarities across public school systems of all throughout the United States. It's a somewhat uniquely American construct, our public school system, and the ability, the requirement that things literally be public and that they're overseen by public boards and public budgets and public funding, and that they have to follow state and federal law. So I think that being able to translate from one public education system to another public education system is not a huge leap. But having no experience in a public education system and coming into being the leader of a public education system, I think is problematic.
Other questions? Yeah.
So on the second page, under expertise and experience, you use the term significant,
Mhm.
which is obviously, as you know, kind of a subjective term.
Sure.
So who adjudicates whether significant is sufficient and kind of leaves it open to how much is enough? I'm curious. It kind of leaves it open to a opportunity for post-selection criticism on whether something was significant. How do you respond?
Assuming that's fair. I think that there are three different entities that have to be involved in the appointment of a Secretary of Education. First, the State Board of Education, and then the governor, and then the Senate. And so at each point, anybody could make a decision. Well, I don't think this is significant enough. Maybe the State Board reviews a bunch of, applications and say, well, this person's experience is not significant enough by our measure, by the board's measure. And then the governor could then have their own measurement of it and say, well, the three candidates that the board sent me, I think this person's experience is the best experience. I think it's most significant, and I'm going to choose this one. And then the Senate would again, we would all make our choices about whether we individually or collectively believe. So yes, it's subjective, but all along the way, there are different people making those choices. And I think it's not, and clearly people can have different opinions about what they believe is significant. But the reason that I included the word significant is that, having a summer internship doing something maybe is not significant, but having 10 years of classroom experience at teaching, middle school math, I would say that is significant. Somebody else might not think that's significant, but I think 10 years of teaching math in a middle school is significant experience. So it's really supposed to be, if not token experience, it's real experience.
Okay, so I'll dovetail into Senator Williams' question about curriculum development. I agree. My wife's an educator. She's head of school, et cetera. She's been a curriculum development specialist. Curriculum development is special. So say, for example, we go back to your comment about a teacher, of course, in the classroom has some sense of curriculum development because it's part of their daily job, but it's more of a minor factor of the job than it is if you're the curriculum development coordinator with the school. So again, kind of leaves you in a position of, well, how much is enough? Is being a teacher enough, or do you need to be, as written here, you must have significant experience in curriculum development. It's a little ambiguous on what's enough. And I understand the 3 tiers of analysis on who should be nominated, but any thoughts on like a curriculum development coordinator, totally focused versus a teacher, incidentally.
Yeah, and so I mean, with number 2, I was trying to get at, and some of it is how do you word it, what you're trying to get at, but trying to get at somebody who has experience being a teacher. And I think for sure a curriculum development manager has had more experience doing the specific job of curriculum development. And I'm open to suggestions if you have little tweaks that you all would want to suggest. And if significant is an issue, I'd be willing to say just experience and expertise in these areas if you want. But I think regardless, it's always going to be subjective with those three groups or individuals. But just what I think it's important that we have the requirements more fleshed out and in fact to give each of those entities a guide by which to judge a candidate.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
I guess 2 things.
Mhm.
The on line 10, I'm wondering why demonstrated is struck out. And just making it just education. I agree that there should be educational leadership there, but why not demonstrated educational leadership?
I don't have a good answer to why I decided to strike out demonstrated. Demonstrated educational leadership, I think would be fine. The management, there's management was up above, so that's why I struck out and management abilities, but I'd be fine with putting demonstrated back in there.
And I think I agree with point 1, but I think with point 2, I'm trying to think of the different hypothetical scenarios of people who would make wonderful secretaries of AOE. And I think that, if you have somebody who, they go straight into being a principal and then a superintendent, and then maybe they get a job in AOE, I feel like that's somebody with a ton of experience in public education management, but they may not necessarily have classroom instruction, except for maybe when they were a principal and they subbed in here and there. So, and I mean, I fully get the idea of wanting somebody who knows what a teacher's day-to-day is like, but I think that excluding perhaps unintentionally the people who, principals, superintendents who have, decades of public education management. And I feel like that could kind of unintentionally cut out a big chunk of the talent.
Mhm.
Just don't know.
I think, principals are almost always, I can't say 100%, but I think nearly 100% of principals have been teachers. It's rare that you would have a principal that hasn't ever been a teacher. And they may be different types of teachers, could be guidance counselor, could be, a special educator, could be kindergarten teacher or whatever, but, it's rare, very rare to have a principal that's never had classroom experience, and usually superintendents go up the ranks, principals go up the ranks, so almost always in our public education system, people start as teachers and move up. But I hear you. I mean, there may be a few examples that we could come up with that haven't gone that route. Yeah, I don't know if you have suggestion. I think that but I do feel like it's important that they have experience being an instructor, being a teacher, because that's what ultimately the system is about.
Yes. So the amendment introduces a whole slew of time limits, and you're adding a couple of time lists.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious if you're aware of any other cabinet members who have language similar to this in their, kind of profile selection process.
I don't know for sure. I think most of them don't. And I don't know, Beth, if you know for sure, because you just do this area. But I don't think that most of them, some of them have timelines, but not all of them. And this is more in line with what sort of, there are more strict timelines for judges and sort of the judiciary appointments. And I think the Green Mountain Care Board has a similar kind of stepwise process. So this wouldn't be the only one that has this kind of process. And I think especially when there are multiple actors that are required to do something, that's when you seem to have the timelines, like the judicial nominating board has to do something by this time, and then the governor, and then the Senate. So this is more similar to that because it involves a board doing something first, and then the governor, and then the Senate. Most other appointments that don't involve a board, it's just the governor who has to act and not. So that's why I think this is important to have a timeline, because then it requires each, and I also did consider, just so putting in a timeline for the Senate to act, but that is really usually the Senate. We act based on our rules, not based on statute. So I didn't end up putting anything in there saying like the Senate has to approve or disapprove within 60 days or something like that. I didn't.
If you do find any cabinet positions that do have timelines, strict timelines, I'd be happy to, because it would be good to if we do something like this, that it have some precedent as opposed to being some reaction.
Well, I can certainly look that up or ask probably the director who does GovOps stuff might know. Tim might know more. But it's not uncommon, especially when there are multiple actors, to sort of keep everybody on schedule.
Good. And then a follow-up question to that is, so the language in the amendment is a bit prescriptive on expertise and background and such. And I'm curious again, if there's other cabinet roles or folks that report directly to the governor that have such prescriptive requirements, thinking like, we in economic development dealing with the Cannabis Control Board. I mean, guys in the cannabis control board are probably not growers, and they may not even be, consumers. And I'm wondering, anyway, I'm just curious if there are other examples of prescriptive.
I think that there are, but I would have to do a little bit more research to find specific examples.
I can answer it.
Oh, go for it.
So so I'm on the judicial nominating board. It is very prescriptive for that for when we're hiring judges, essentially. There's a number of criteria you have to meet. There's also a timeline of how many years you've been practicing, and how many of those years have been in Vermont compared to other states, but substantially more prescriptive, in my opinion, than what's on there, but that's just the JMP.
Thank you.
Yes.
The other thing is that, the governor may have something special, some special qualification in mind.
Mhm.
That, he's looking for in a Secretary of Education.
Mhm.
I don't see that language in there that.
So
Could be-
on page 1, lines 15 through 17. The governor may issue a letter to the state board with information regarding qualifications and experience the governor would prefer to see in potential candidates. So he can weigh in on, or they can, the governor can weigh in on what the governor wants. And, like I said, I'm open to suggestions but I do think it's important that, a Secretary of Education have certain qualifications, just like a judge. That this is a position that oversees our public school system and should have education experience and more than just token education experience. And I think that there are qualifications for others. I mean, I like I said, I could, if I had time, I could do a little bit more research on it, but if you're becoming the secretary of, doing something very specific, I think it's important to be qualified to do it.
Yes.
So getting back to the very beginning, within 30 days, I think we actually took testimony from why we worded it the way we did for the state board will begin a national search process no later than 60 days after receipt. You have 90 days, basically 120 days you're giving them to have the three candidates or many after that, how many days. We gave them 90 days to start the search with not an end date. And I believe in testimony from the state board, they felt they needed a little bit more time because they only meet certain times. And it would take, by the time you get a hold of the candidate and get them, that they may take longer than a month. That we're given them 90 days to start, you're 120 days total. And I believe we tried to put a timeline on it, and their testimony was that would make it problematic in getting the candidate, getting vetting all the candidates. So that's why we, in this, did not put a timeline on how soon it should be submitted to the governor.
Okay, I think that, what happened last time was that it was over a year that we didn't have a Secretary of Education. That was really problematic. And the State Board of Education took a really long time. First, they took a long time initiating the search. And what they kept saying was, well, we didn't hear from the governor to tell us to do it, even though they were supposed to start it. So that's why there's a 30 days. Within 30 days, they start it, whether they've heard from the governor or not. And the governor may issue a letter, it's obviously always up to the governor whether they want to do that. And so that gives them, a deadline to start the search. And then 90 days after they start it, they would have to send the candidates to the governor. So that gives them 3 months to do the search. And then, the governor a month to make the governor's choice out of those 3 candidates, interview people. And again, I'm open if you want to tweak these numbers, but I do think it's important to hold each of the players to some kind of schedule so that we don't end up in the situation where we don't have a Secretary of Ed for over a year again, because I think that was really and it was actually even longer than that because we had an interim secretary before that. So we ended up having an education system without a leader for a really long time. And the only way to ensure that everybody holds to their schedule is put in the law. So, you know, if 90 days you don't think is enough, I'd be open to making it a little bit longer, but the State Board of Education is, you know, appointed to do a job. One of probably their most important job is to hire, you know, help hire a Secretary of Education. So if they can't find ways to meet in 90 days to do that, that's problematic.
Well, I just know we heard testimony from them, and that's why this wording was based the way we.
Do you mind if I look?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Remind-
just a little more clarity, what they said was they meet no more frequently than once a month. Right. And again, it's a quasi volunteer or different stipend. But you have a question if I can. So if the State Board of Education meets once a month and they get a notification, or everybody in the state understands that there's a need for a national search or need for a new state Secretary of Education, the governor is going to provide his overview of what he desires to be put into the job description,
Mhm.
right? I mean, that's kind of what.
Well, not the job description. The job description is,
So if he wants a specialist in, say, for hypothetically, international baccalaureate program, which is obviously not going to be the case, but he's going to put that in his letter. That's going to go into the job description because that's going to frame what the State Board of Education focuses on. I mean, that's the job description's got to focus on that. So the governor's letter has got to precede the State Board of Education developing the job description being advertised and going out to the world. And I don't think I'm not sure that's achievable within 30 days. Again, with one State Board of Education meeting, their first meeting will be, because we talked about, they took testimony about this process, that they assign a subcommittee.
Mhm.
I mean, this case, last case, it was 3 people. That subcommittee is the one who then goes off and takes the governor's letter, develops the job description, does the posting for the job, et cetera. 30 days, I think that's a bit ambitious. That's just my having heard the process.
well, so the 30 days is that they have to initiate the search.
Yeah, national search.
Right. So,
So how do you do that if you don't have your job description?
well, within that 30 days, the governor
Right. But then,
the job description is there. I mean, the Secretary of Education is the Secretary of
not without the
Education.
focus. So every person I ever hired, there was a focus. Yeah, I could hire a lawyer, but maybe I want a lawyer that's got education, background, experience. Maybe I need a specific specialty
Mhm,
for that particular moment in time
mhm.
to hire to address those concerns for the state. That's what the job description is all about. Job description is not vanilla. It's very targeted. Everyone, even me, you know, everybody I hired was a very specific hire. That's just
So the
nature.
within the first 30 days, the governor can submit a letter saying, this is what I want in a candidate. And if the governor fails to do it, the Board of Education, they go through the search process without any guidance from the governor. If the governor.
That's my point. And I don't want to, debate the whole thing, but the governor, the job description's got to be sent out once. It's got to reflect what the state needs, and part of that input is from the governor.
Right,
Sure.
so the governor needs to meet the deadline and get them the information. What happened last time was that the
But within
governor
30 days,
did it.
if the
really
State Board of
took a
Education
really
only
long
needs
time.
one time, maybe they're not even going to have formed their subcommittee yet in 30 days. That's the problem. But I understand the reaction. I really do. I mean, I get it. I'm sympathetic, but I don't want to be over prescriptive and then get a whip jib process. Whip jib. You want it bad, you get it bad. Meaning you want it too fast, you get it.
You little like,
Yeah.
Those are weak systems.
With Jim. If you want something really bad, you're gonna get it really bad because you've accelerated the process.
I totally hear you. And like I said, I'm open to suggestions for if you want to tweak if you have tweaks that you want. I mean, I understand that you have language in yours, but I think that leaving it up without the timeline more prescriptive has led to a really long delay in getting a Secretary of Education. And if you, what is it? What is your saying? If you
With Jim.
whip chip, it was a whip chip. Didn't happen. It was not done well. And the process wasn't fast enough and the outcome wasn't good enough. And so that's what this amendment is trying to address, both the process and the outcome. And I think that it's, that's what we do. We create laws to make sure that we improve processes and improve outcomes.
Thank you.
Okay, I mean, if you have suggestions that would help you feel more comfortable with this, I'm totally open to your suggestions.
Thank you for doing it. Really?
You're welcome.
Yep.
And I will just wait to hear from all of y'all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, no, did I just miss it?
We're about to go walk through, so.
Okay. Are you staying? I know I have to get back to. Right. Okay. Yes.
Good afternoon, Beth St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel. I don't know what you need to walk through. I feel like you just walked through it.
Well, we never actually. Yeah.
I think you asked a question about almost every piece of language. So
True.
I'm happy to walk through it if you want. I also just want to make good use of our time. What's the committee's pleasure?
What was that?
I was just talking to myself. I mean, yeah, it seems pretty straightforward, but I don't
Actually, it does seem pretty straightforward.
Mhm.
So, like we talked about before, what we haven't actually ever done is the walkthrough of the CTE attendance outside Clippers Region.
Okay.
That you drafted, but we talked about it a lot, but we haven't actually ever done a walkthrough. And so why don't we do that? Does somebody have that in front of them?
Did we get that FERPA information?
No, we don't have that yet, but actually, I have a feeling we'll hear something about that.
Oh, okay.
So about what's,
Do you want me to share my screen for the walkthrough or just walk through it?
the only reason to share your screen is for the people anybody watching, so like, sure.
Okay. Okay, so this is an amendment to H 480 that would add a new section. To be 20A. Students attending a CTE center outside their service region. And it starts with some definitions. So receiving district means a school district receiving tuition on behalf of a student to whom it provides CTE education or CT education. Sending district means a school district paying tuition on behalf of a student to a school district that provides CTE courses. I took all of this from current law.
Yeah.
State board rules and some statutes.
Okay.
So secondary students may apply for enrollment into programs offered at CTE centers outside their service regions when the center in their service region does not offer the program in which they wish to enroll, or they are not able to enroll in the program of their choice. That's already allowed under current law. The school district of the student's residence shall pay tuition for that enrollment pursuant to an agreement between the sending district and the receiving district that specifies how costs for such enrollments shall be covered. That's actually taken also directly from current law. And what I can do is see how good I am at multitasking today.
So from law or reg?
Well,
Statute?
regulations are law.
That too.
That is from statute.
Okay.
Show you. And this is not, I'm not doing this in an effort to sway your opinion in either way. I watched your testimony yesterday and there was a lot of discussion about what is or is not current law. And so it might be helpful to look at what the law says currently. So this piece here, students may apply for enrollment program offered at CTE centers outside their service region, is taken from I think that's from state board rule, that language, lines 13 through 16 off the top of my head. But this piece about the tuition, this is from, maybe this is not going to be a good productive use of our time. I can come back if you are really interested and annotate the specific piece where, each piece of language is taken from, but it's all taken from current law. Beginning in the 2025-26 school year, a regional CTE center may provide transportation to and from the technical center for students residing outside the technical center service region, if the student is attending pursuant to subsection B of this section, this piece right here. So subsection C is not taken from current law, but it is allowed under current law. There's nothing in current law that prevents, I think you heard this testimony yesterday, from offering transportation. There's just nothing under current law that requires the transportation.
Yeah, their question was on May.
Yeah.
Is there a way to make that more restricted to help the CTs? Because I'm sure they're worried if you had 5 to 10 kids, it's cost effective. Anything less than that, it might not be.
You have
That
two
applies
options.
in May.
You have two options, may or shall.
Okay.
If it's a may, it's a may, and if it's a shall, it's a shall. You can build in discretion in either direction. So if it's a may, if all of these conditions are met, we can build that in. And if it's a shall, if all of these conditions are met, we can build that in. But the amendment you have in front of you is a may, and absent direction from someone advancing the amendment, I can't sit here and pontificate what would make it palatable.
And I had thought if we made it shall, if cost effective or financially possible, but then I think that opens up to.
Mandate.
Yep. Yeah, so I want to not fully think that.
Okay, so we're on page 2, subsection D. Any changes in the tuition charged by a current technical center due to the acceptance of students residing outside of the CTE center's service region shall be reconciled through the tuition reconciliation process outlined in the state board rule. I was very confused by the testimony you heard yesterday on this. I think there might be some confusion over what this subsection is meant to do. This is not meant, my understanding, I can't speak to the intent that would be for the sponsor of the amendment, but when I drafted this, I drafted it meaning that because a technical center is accepting a whole bunch of new students, if the tuition they would charge all of the schools in their catchment region would change because the math changes because they suddenly have 100 extra students, then that process is already built out in state board rule through the reconciliation process. At the end of whatever the rule says, there's that reconciliation process for tuition. This was not meant to say that the tuition, this subsection is not meant to stand for anything related to the difference in tuition between the home center and the center that a student will go to because there's room there. That's not the reconciliation. The reconciliation process is literally just the reconciliation process that's going to happen naturally. And this is meant to call out, if you accept 100 extra students, your cost per student may go down. And therefore the tuition that you've charged may not be accurate. And there is a reconciliation process built into the state board rule to already account for that. Current law.
So, yeah, so theoretically, if this section wasn't in the bill, in a way, nothing would change.
If this amendment didn't exist, nothing would change, but yes.
Okay, good, okay.
Thank you for being extremely clear on that when they couldn't be.
Right.
able-
I think you're right, there was some misconceptions.
So did I understand that the amendment doesn't actually do anything?
No, I don't think that's. I think, I think everything that's contained in here is either allowable under current law or is currently in current law in various different places that may be hard to grasp altogether.
Okay.
So to the extent that putting these different pieces in one place helps with an understanding of what's allowable under current law, then perhaps it does do something. But it is all allowed under current.
So,
Thank you.
so just to look,
And I'm not trying to advocate in either direction. I just want to be clear.
to take that one step further, there, and there's perhaps a difference between allowed and articulated. Is this
Correct.
actually all articulated in different places?
I would say most, if not all of it, yeah,
Okay,
except for the transportation piece, which I think that that's borderline articulated.
Okay.
But, yes,
okay, so weeks.
So that's, the summary is pretty much what I picked up by the end of the conversation yesterday, but the one bit that I thought wasn't in current law was, sharing of the directory information. That for some reason just kind of hit a speed bump. You couldn't find resolution with that. What are your thoughts?
allow me to read to you from current law. Okay, all right, you're gonna have to give me some grace. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen while I find it. Yes. Okay. That happened faster than I thought it would. So this is section 1541A, responsibility of local boards and sending districts. It's current law. Subsection B, a school district that maintains a secondary school shall provide the names and addresses of enrolled students to the CTE Center for its region, for the limited purpose of the CTE Center providing information to students and their parents about CTE offerings. The amendment says, a school district that maintains a secondary school shall provide the requested directory information of enrolled students to a CTE center located outside the school district's assigned CTE service region for the limited purpose of the CTE center providing information to students and their parents about CTE offerings in the following situations. I think this is already allowed under current law and it's allowed under FERPA. The discussion I was hearing yesterday was about who is the holder of this information and the fact that when a CTE center turns a student away because they don't have room or, whatever the reasons, they are no longer the holder of that directory information. The amendment and current law is requiring the school district to share their high school students' directory information, which is allowed to be shared under FERPA with CTE centers outside of their catchment region. If the assigned CTE center has a wait list, there were students that were denied enrollment to their CTE center, or a student is interested in a program not offered in the students assigned CTE center.
Did you,
So it was
just a follow up, can you flip back so I can see it, flip back to the language of the current? Thank you.
so
So to Senator Sheen's point is that I said yesterday, I would be glad to withdraw but that sounds to me like it's what's in law already, but they weren't doing it.
Well, I disagree a little bit. I thought it's actually in law. So what it says is
It isn't.
for its region,
Right.
not outside.
Correct.
I think that's.
That's even a lot, that's.
That's,
even-
yeah,
That is a change.
Correct, that's a change.
but
There you go. That- Trying to help you answer.
Yeah. So.
there's nothing that would prohibit that information sharing under current law.
Outside the region.
Correct.
But we haven't told them to do it.
This is a
Wouldn't
requirement.
prohibit it.
Yeah, this is a requirement. Directory information under FERPA
Okay, okay.
is, I think the examples you were hearing about is all of the influx of mail soon to be high school seniors receive related to their post-secondary opportunities. And all of those organizations, or I think what Gillette used to fundraisers, I think out, they're getting that information from the directory information from high schools. So that information is allowable to be shared under FERPA. And the amendment is written that it's not the CTE center that turns someone away, it's the school district that's required to share that information. Now, how is the school district that doesn't run, I get the practical implications here, right? If you are a school district that does not run a CTE center and you have students who want to go to a CTE center, how are they keeping track of all of the interests of their students and the wait lists and all of that? I don't know how that all works.
It's a lot of work.
But a school district is allowed to give out directory information to a CTE center, either in its catchment area or outside of its service region, I should say. And then that for the limited purpose of providing students information to students and parents about CTE center offerings. That's the same, I took it right from the current law.
Consider a stupid question.
Okay.
Just so we're clear about this, what exactly is directory information?
Oh, that's a good question. Let me pull up.
Sure.
And I am not an expert on career and technical education. I am not in the field. I am not dealing with the folks in the field. So if you are hearing from your technical experts that I'm wrong or that I'm overlooking something, that's a fair criticism for you all to entertain. I'm not trying to sit here and create conflict. I'm just saying I was confused by the confusion yesterday. Okay, FERPA.
Don't think you're the only.
Done. Okay, I am going to. Okay, directory information is information contained in the education records of a student. I'm reading directly from the U.S. Department of Education's website. That would not generally be considered harmful or invasion of privacy or disclosed. Typically, directory information includes information such as name, address, telephone listing, date and place of birth, participation in officially recognized activities in sports, and dates of attendance. A school may disclose directory information to third parties without consent if it is given public notice of the types of information which it designates as directory information. The parents or eligible students' right to restrict the disclosure of such information in the period of time within which a parent or eligible child or student has to notify the school in writing that they don't want that information disclosed. I'm guessing that you all, as parents of students, have seen those. I'm guessing those are common disclosures at the start of the school year.
If you pay attention to them.
There you go.
Okay. So can I finish?
I think we have. That was actually let me go back to sharing my screen. The rest of the amendment was just when the school district is required, under what circumstances the school district is required to share that directory information to centers that are not in their service region. And that's for that, the wait list, someone's been denied, or someone has a really awesome program that their service region just doesn't run.
But I'm going to get back to this. Can you forward to Will what you just read?
The directory information.
So were necessary. Uh, so just to I think some of this up, because this has been very actually quite clarified. Yeah.
I wonder why you're supposed to start with a walkthrough.
So it's been clarifying insofar I think is that on one level, almost everything, not quite everything, but almost everything is current law could be done now, but it's pulled together in one place and it helps potentially limit confusion.
I think whether it helps or hurts is a policy question for you all to grapple with.
Okay, stop. Okay. I don't know which one of you was first, so you go.
Yeah, I mean, I was, in response to that, I mean, I think yesterday we heard very loud and clear from, the person whose name is escaping me, and I feel bad, but she runs.
Dr. McTavish.
No, the,
Oh, Jody Anderson.
yes, that, as Ledge Council said, this is essentially in current law, but there is a communication issue, which I think she indicated is something that she very clearly was going to address and work on. I get hesitant about putting new things around changing language in law because there can always be unintended consequences. Even if we think that it's doing the same thing that is already law, if that makes sense. So if this would essentially not change anything, as far as we are aware, I wouldn't want to move forward with it. I mean, I appreciate and understand the underlying issue, and the whole conversation has been very illuminating, but yeah, it's fine.
Do you want a vote?
Well, we're not right there yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
So nothing in this amendment would require you to go back into the green book and change any law.
No.
Right, so, which brings to mind then, why we need it. Number one, but number two, it's policy that I think everybody who was in the room yesterday agreed that some people are doing it. Some people aren't. If we're all doing it under, one set of guidelines, or, that is a cooperative environment where everybody works together to make sure every student gets CTE education that wants it, then I think we should leave it.
Yeah. Just to again, testimony for everybody in the room yesterday, the double hall one class.
Yeah, we're just waiting on AOE. And
Well, that was just on the FERPA issue,
Yeah.
which is, I think, probably come around to deciding as an issue. So, yes.
So what I heard yesterday made me feel far more strongly that I would support this amendment, because consistently when we know something is allowed, but it's not being practiced, we do tend to clarify that in the law. I mean, we're doing that now with housing. I mean, we're clarifying our intent. And we clarify our intent when it's become that clear that that students are not getting what they need because there's unspoken, rules that people are following that are different than the letter of the law. That memo that I can't figure out how to forward from my phone, because Will told me it says like the header, but not that the memo that was confirmed to be the template language that they're using literally says you're on your own for transportation. And I don't think that's our intent. I think if we reimburse programs and students and they're just saying, well, then they're going to take our bus drivers away or our vans away. And that's why students are hearing you're on your own for transportation. Then I think students are being harmed by the current practices that are not following our law. And I would strongly advocate for this amendment.
I don't see how this is changing what transportation is available. I think it's just reiterating the $1.50.
Well, it says may
Just under
provide transportation.
And frankly, I just think this is reiterating to the districts that they should not be discouraging students based on transportation issues alone. And that's what I read in that memo.
Well,
So I think, you expect what you inspect, and one of the process, I think that's missing is requiring somebody to go around and make sure that people are doing what they're supposed to do.
I don't know why AO is not doing that.
So,
I think the saying is you get what you,
okay,
you don't get what.
yeah, I'm looking at it from a different perspective.
I like that. Expect what you inspect.
If you don't go around and you don't go around and evaluate the process from time to time, everything changes. So, and if there's a requirement of, it's legal, it's in law. And we're not making, nobody's going out to make sure we're doing it, then that's breaking the law.
I think this particular memo, which you're referring to, is a one district, one CT.
No, it's not.
Or is it? That's massive.
Yeah.
Okay, let me reprint. So is it an AOE guideline or was it a CTE guideline from a specific center?
Well, Jody is the head of the association.
Active.
So she said it's something she sent out that many are taking verbatim and using in their language. So absent AOE doing their job, you have the CTE centers essentially saying, well, this is law, but it still, we have talked to some of the CTEs and they don't like it because they don't want to have to share buses or set any expectations. I would like for us to set an expectation that they will do everything in their power until we fix CTE in a bigger sense, to be clear that transportation options are available to students, may be available to students.
That is the problem.
Right, but that memo said you are on your own. That's not true.
Quickly, I mean, I think, and if I'm unintentionally misrepresenting what was said yesterday, I think Joey acknowledged that the phrasing of that was unintentional and that he's going to take steps to try and mitigate.
She didn't say we would change it.
It's, that's what I.
She said she would bring it back to the group.
Quick, that seemed to be what she was communicating to us, and that the language that was transmitted everywhere was probably could have been phrased differently.
She said it was on her. She goes, that was so
I don't think, so I don't think that based on that memo, that necessarily we should be changing laws or restructuring or reorganizing laws that are already in place. I mean, would this make it more clear or would it make it less clear? I mean, I don't know what's unclear about the laws as they're written right now.
I didn't either until yesterday.
Can I back it up a level?
Yes.
So who does ACTED follow? Do they exist? Because so I think CTE for the longest time was kind of on its own. They were out there existing, providing service, but they really didn't feel like they had anybody that they were answerable to. So this group of CTE centers that got together, I think they kind of made their own rules. Do they fall under administrative control of AOE? That ACTED?
No, I think.
I believe VACTED is a trade group. It's a V, just like the Vermont School Board.
Okay, so they're not mandated to do anything, really.
So to me, it seems that the law is already pretty clear. What I think we tripped over yesterday was the personal sort of interpretation that was broadcast to the group that may not have been worded the best. And that is where the clarification is. I'm not sure if there's any law change here that's gonna, make that type of website communication any better. It's again, one person's interpretation of what the current law.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess I would hope, I just want to call it to question. I support this amendment. And I don't know, I don't think anyone here has the power to withdraw the amendment.
No.
Okay, so it's
No.
going to the floor.
Going for it.
Yeah, so we're taking a straw poll.
We could take a straw poll, we could take no position. We could. Or if you wanted to.
I'll let Terry. Just Bill, or his man.
So I move that we do straw poll, support,
So you'd like to do a straw poll, right?
Favorable.
table.
Okay, well, let's do a straw poll. All of those, well, any other questions?
Hold on, so I just want to make sure, so I'm getting a sense that that the majority of the committee isn't in favor of it, correct me if I'm wrong, but so we're voting it out favorably, so it would be a vote of,
It would be a failure to vote it out favorably if the majority didn't vote yes. But his motion was favorable.
Do you intend it to be favorable or unfavorable?
We haven't,
Which you say, or,
Favorable.
okay, yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
I think we need to tell people, just kind of reinforce it.
So I can ask one question before we move on, and since this is session law, what actually happens with session law? How do people know it exists?
They're good at finding things. Session law is hard to find. It will just live in infamy in the acts that are recorded every year by the Secretary of State. Puts together all of the acts of each session and those white books up there. And it will live there. It will attach to 480 if it passes. And folks have to know that it exists to go find it. They could remember that there was a whole bunch of testimony about this and that Senator Hardy offered it and that I was led to counsel, and they could go look it up under my name on your website and find it. If someone was really good at using the search feature to search bills for key terms, they could find it. But session law is difficult to find.
I think in practice, I think I meant what I said yesterday to Dr. McTavish. It clearly took some amount of courage and a lot of her own time and energy to bring this forward because she was not getting a remedy another way. And it is a common sense problem that she is trying to solve, not just a self-serving one. If there is, if there's wait lists in the 2 regions next to her, and she could bring down the cost for everyone
I think
with more
everybody, I
students.
think everybody gets that. They'll-
Okay, so she knows where this is. And to me, that helps her as she works toward a solution, a common sense solution in her region.
But all the laws are already in effect, so and you just like it, you want to condense.
Well, it's that we are endorsing this and saying this shouldn't be optional. This shouldn't be, so hard to accomplish.
Yes,
Yeah, one part of me, one part of me agrees that Dr. is it McTavish or?
McTavish.
McTavish. She got the visibility issues. And then we all walked away from yesterday afternoon recognizing that it's already part of law. So I'm not sure repeating the same law you already have gets her any more visibility. I think the end goal that she really wanted was to have a conversation with Stafford. And that sounds like she'll get a conversation with Stafford. So without making this kind of a political show of who's more supportive of CTEs than the next senator, I'm not sure we're accomplishing a heck of a lot here. So although I'm a sponsor for the bill, and I fully embrace the concept of inside outside region sharing of students when programs are full or people are on a wait list or what have you. I'm really not sure that this is an effective use of legislation.
But I agree with you, as long as we have some mechanism to know that the way it's written, the law is going to get acted upon. And I think that the only thing this does is reinforce, puts all that law together and tells people, you know, we have visibility on it. And we know that it isn't happening, number one. And, you know, it's the same thing we've been saying about, H 454. It's about the quality of education, it's about the student. So,
But again, the one thing we didn't solve is the cost problem,
right,
one region to another. So, I mean,
well,
when we're
in
10,
454 we have.
when we're $10,000, we haven't yet. But when we're $10,000 different between two regions, and these are the two regions that are talking to each other, this fundamental problem, and that we're not going to solve. That's also another discussion.
That was as clearly as I think it could be articulated today to be, I think, just a blatant miscommunication from AOE on how the process works. It says right here what the state board regulations are, that when a center, a CTE gets an influx of students, there is a reconciliation process. I asked that, you asked that, people tried to ask that, and that was somehow not an answer that they could give. And here's just the plain black and white regulation that says how reconciliation works. So it would be a different cost.
Correct, but
Reconciliation's
they're-
also in 2393.
But they're looking at the upfront cost to begin with. That's what you get a little bob from the other schools. Like our CT is only this much. You're $10,000 more. They have to fund that now, regardless. That's why they were like, well, the student can go there because it's their right, but we're not going to fund the driving because we're already losing money sending them up to a higher school.
Mm-hmm.
And then Dr. McTavish said, well, we'll pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're like, well, I believe Stafford's like, that's good. You know, or they gotta say it's good. It's law. They have to say it's good.
You're pointing at something that isn't in
Well,
the
but
same
this,
place.
all this does is condense it. We could find the statutes and say, here, go to this statute, that statute, that statute, that. Because it's doing the same thing this piece of paper is doing.
Sorry, just a process check. Are we trying to vote on this amendment too?
Yes.
Okay. I'm a yes on both of them. And may need to leave.
Okay.
So,
Where would we be?
huh?
Well, you're voting yes on both.
Yes,
Okay,
I'm a yes on both.
okay.
And I can try to come back, but
Are we ready to vote on? I guess. I will confess I'm going back and forth on this. I found the whole discussion over the last couple of days, even though it was slightly confused yesterday, the whole thing really illuminated some of the issues that we knew were there and that we know we need to get to. Even as I'm verbalizing right now, I'm still getting back and forth, but way to go on this. I think I'm willing to vote for this, even I'm just on a straw thing land, it doesn't put a floor to decide what it wants to do. Frankly, I think I also take the heart center issues and like, but then I think, well, it's just session one. So anyway, who wants to go? How many yes? We have a motion on the floor for yes. Sorry.
Again, it's redundancy and where are we?
back of your Hannaford Center
It is back in there.
and your district name and your own name
I
on.
know, but it's after getting the realization that all this is already in law. I guess like my good senator from Rutland, if he wants me to, I'll support it because all it's doing is doing redundancy. I can support, but I think it's a shame that we're doing that.
Shane would have to.
Well, after the vote.
After at least took
Okay. Okay, let's just do it again, make sure we're all yeses. And, no, okay.
So who reports the amendment?
Senator Hardy. and all we do is say that the committee took a straw poll.
Is this in a section that we know someone's reporting, or it's a new section?
New section.
Shall amend it on the floor.
So I think the reporter of the bill would just represent what the committee took some testimony, stands in with. And, it's got, yeah.
I will turn around.
She was bringing an amendment up to this.
Okay,
Oh, okay.
so then we have, so it's just a straw poll. We don't have any, we don't introduce it, we don't explain it, we don't have to do anything. Then we have the other bill, the other amendment. Nothing into this, just a straw poll. Okay, yes, okay. So then we have the issue of changing the way that the secretary goes in any discussion. That I have some thoughts, but this isn't paid, frankly. The 90 days to a search, just it's not remotely. It's not possible.
We took testimony on
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
and this was well thought out, I believe, by this committee.
And I think our amendment was actually much more careful.
It's already in the bill, right? It's in for.
Yeah, what was, you're right, our amendment, our portion of the bill. And also, we haven't really taken no testimony on the new requirements. And that is one of the instances probably much more complex than it might seem in the first question. So I also think this has the potential to derail the bill.
Right.
And I don't want to derail 480 after all. Very critical bill.
Yeah.
Critical, we get 480.
Before we can offer just one insight. So when we're hiring somebody of this caliber, 6 months minimum.
Yeah.
6 months from the recognition of the fact that you need them to the point where we actually decide on the person, and then it could be time to get them actually on board. 6 months minimum.
And I remember when Secretary French announced he wasn't going, it was April of 2023, and then it said, and I kept thinking the next session, what's he waiting for? When are they going to advertise the position? We found out last April when he wasn't being stepping down.
I'll just say this, this is not a hill I'm gonna die on, particularly because I don't want the bill to get vetoed. It has a lot of other really important good stuff in it now. And I'm not really that attached at all to the time frame issue. I'm looking at subsection C, and I think that does deserve discussion next session. Because I think people do think generally that's how the decision is made. And we did have that conversation in the judicial retention process as well. Senator Rashid may remember, because there have been people in the selection process who feel like their hands are tied when there's a low bar for what your experience is. And I think this raises the bar to where people believe the bar should be or already is. So I'm just saying I'm a yes, but I imagine everyone else is going to vote no, and I'm okay with that.
So any other comments? For this proposed amendment before we do the straw poll? Okay, those in favor?
We're doing a favorable.
Well,
We could do it either way, but
right, so those in favor? 1, 2, opposed. Okay. That completes the words of the day. Unless anybody has anything? Thank you, Ben.
you're welcome.
We do need to take some moment at some point.
Oh, you can do that now. We have.
Actually, I need to drive.
We're on.
I need to drive down to the school board.
We're gonna, we are going to be here a lot, I think, the next couple of days for amendments. So we'll have a chance. Okay.